Friends, hello there and welcome to another episode in the teaching series. Hey, this is part 3 of our Zacchaeus series coming from Luke chapter 19. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the first 2 episodes in this series, I'd highly recommend you doing so or listening to it, as that will give you a lot of the background information. And we're just going to kind of continue on with where we left off last week. So just as a reminder to us, Jesus is on his way from Galilee up to Jerusalem. He's actually going up to Jerusalem to die, and he comes to Jericho, this very wealthy, very influential, important city that was on the route to get up to Jerusalem. And Jesus engages with a guy by the name of Zacchaeus, the chief tax collector. And in our first episode, we talked about how Zacchaeus had this desire, this longing to be changed, and he put himself in a position to interact with Jesus, whether he knew he could or not. We don't know, but he at least was in position. He got up into the tree. And then in last week's episode, we talked about this extravagant, holistic response he has as a result of his encounter with Jesus. And today, what I want to look at is what happened here in Jericho when Jesus interacted with Zacchaeus. What did Jesus do in order for Zacchaeus to have this extravagant, holistic response? And I just want to highlight 5 observations around Jesus' actions. And there are more. You'll probably make other connections, and I'd actually love to read about them in the comment section at walkingthetext.com underneath this video. But I just want to offer 5 observations that I think are critical to the story. And as we look at these observations, I want you to think about this on 2 levels. 1, of course, how Jesus is doing it. But then 2, what does that mean for us? And just, a couple of these may not connect for you, but maybe one in particular, man, your heart may just be pricked in that moment. And it's almost kind of like, I need to pay attention to what's happening in this particular moment. So here we go. Zacchaeus is up in a tree. So this is when Jesus is going to interact with him. It says, verse 5, Jesus reached the spot. He looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. And the first observation is simple, but I think it's really profound, and it's that Jesus knew his name and pursued him. Now, just knowing his name, I hear people say all the time, well, of course Jesus knew people's name. He's the Son of God. He's divine. He knew everything. I think we often fail to allow Jesus to be also 100% human in the gospel stories. That yes, he is divine, but he is also human. And in this, I believe that Jesus is aware of who Zacchaeus is, not because Jesus is the Son of God, but because Jesus was aware of who people were. Now, we talked in the first episode that the very fact that Zacchaeus climbs a tree, this is shameful in the first century. He would have stuck out like a sore thumb. This is not something that everybody was doing. Maybe the kids are up in the tree, but to see an adult, Jesus was aware and he called him by name. Now, again, he's the godfather of Jericho. Everybody knows who Zacchaeus is, but I still think it's interesting that Jesus calls him by name and in a sense pursues him. Now, again, we said in the first episode that Zacchaeus is pursuing Jesus, and I think both is true here, because when Zacchaeus is up in this tree, Jesus doesn't have to acknowledge him. He can just continue on. It would not have been hard to do so. You see, when Jesus shows up in Jericho, everybody knows who Jesus is. In fact, when Jesus is off in the distance, no doubt word has reached Jericho. Jesus is on his way. Kids are running through the streets. They're letting everybody know that Jesus is coming. People know who Jesus is. I mean, they are probably changing into the very best thing that they have. There is a buzz going on. The elders of the city are preparing their homes, because when somebody who is distinguished and dignified like Jesus comes into your city, proper protocol would be to meet with Jesus, and then Jesus would go to the home of one of the elders of the city, and they would give him food, they would wash his feet, they'd give him something to drink. It would just be this hospitality through the roof in the midst of all of this. And yet, in the midst of all of that's going on, Jesus stops, he sees Zacchaeus, and he calls him by name. It's amazing. And then the very next thing Jesus says is, I must stay at your house today. And this is why I would say that the second observation here is that Jesus offered him love and acceptance. And you go, well, how do you get that from Jesus saying, I must go to your house today? Well, think about this for a moment. Why is Zacchaeus up in a tree in the first place? He has been pushed to the outside of the community. Again, whether that's shortness means stature, it definitely means social status. He can't get to Jesus. Nobody wants him around. He is despised. He is hated. People have pushed him away. Zacchaeus climbs a tree, and nobody in their right mind could possibly imagine that Jesus would want to go to his house. He's Zacchaeus. He's the chief tax collector. No. You go to the house of one of the elders. And Jesus goes, no. I want to go to your house. Now, Zacchaeus, being wealthy, as we're introduced in the story, would have had a very luxurious home. In fact, here is an artist's rendering by Balazs Below of a villa, this townhouse in Pompeii. So in 69 AD, 79. Can't remember. It's one of those two dates. Mount Vesuvius explodes and solidifies the city of Pompeii. And so we have these amazing ruins, and out of that, artist's renderings of what a wealthy, rich Roman villa would have looked like. And it would have been very spread out. Even in Jericho, it has much more land space. Jerusalem is much more concentrated, but Jericho is much more kind of free-flowing. So his house probably looked something like this, and Jesus would have gone in, and they would have shared a meal together. That would have been the first thing that would have happened after they washed Jesus' feet, gave him something to drink, as they would sit down and have a meal together. And in the first century world, to have a meal together was a cultural sign of social acceptance and love. Jesus is going to have a meal with Zacchaeus at his house, and everyone is incredulous. They cannot believe what is going on. In fact, Gary Burge has this really great paragraph where he talks about this in his book, Encounters with Jesus, and it's on page 66, and I just want to read this rather than putting it up because it just helps you to understand how shocking this would have been to the entire community for Jesus to say this to Zacchaeus. It says, we should not underestimate the shock this has on the crowd. People of high stature have suddenly been bypassed. Elders whose homes are being burnished to perfection for the visitor now stand dumbfounded. Protocol has been wrecked. Hard questions are being asked at once. Jesus does not seem to understand appropriate conduct. He doesn't understand that righteous men should socialize only with others who are equally righteous, but he is going to linger in the house of an unrighteous man. And friends, this leads us to the third observation I want to make, and that's this. Jesus didn't care about his reputation. He cared about people. Everybody is talking, they're angry, they're upset, no doubt. This is an honor and shame culture. Jesus in many ways has shamed the elders by not going with them. He is shaming himself because he's going to the house of Zacchaeus. Everybody's angry, everybody's upset. In fact, notice what happens that when Jesus says, I gotta go to your house, Zacchaeus comes down. It says this, all the people saw this in verse 7 and began to mutter, he is gone to be the guest of a sinner. Now, notice this word mutter. The word mutter only shows up one other time in the entire New Testament, and it's actually in Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. It says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the Torah, or the law, muttered, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So just a few chapters earlier, you have these connections that help us to see something going on in Luke 19 as well, which is that you have a tax collector, you have sinners, you have eating together, you have all of these connections. And just like in Luke 15, the religious people are angry and upset because Jesus is sharing a meal with them. And the same thing is now going to happen in Luke 19. And the only two places where we get this word mutter or grumble are here in Luke 19 and in Luke 15. And so there's something going on in connection to Luke 15. You've got the tax collectors, you have the sinners, you have the eating with them, you have the muttering, and check this out as well, you have running. Remember what Zacchaeus does. He's looking for Jesus, he runs and he climbs a tree. Again, running is shameful. You do not do this as a grown man in the ancient world. And when we step back and say, where else does running happen? You find out that prior to this story in Luke 19, the only place this has happened is in Luke 15. And it is out of Jesus responding to everybody being angry and upset that he is sharing a meal of socially accepting and loving people who are on the outside that the religious folks don't think deserve it. And Jesus goes, let me tell you a few stories. And he talks about the lost sheep, he talks about the lost coin, and he talks about the lost sons. And the youngest son, who sold off his inheritance, went off and squandered his wealth, who comes back, he's shamed the entire community, he shamed his family by doing what he's doing. And it says that the father that represents God in the story is that the father runs in order to embrace the lost son. And so you have this connection to Luke 15, and because the tax collectors, they didn't have a ton of friends, probably only the people that they were able to get bribed by, but there's such a tight network that I wonder if Zacchaeus knows he could potentially be accepted by Jesus because of the Luke 15 stories that Jesus tells when the tax collectors and sinners are being welcomed by Jesus. I don't know, but there is something going on with Luke 15. And before we launch into the next observation, I just feel like it's helpful for a moment for us to just pause, because the crowd is upset and they're muttering, both in 19 and in chapter 15. And oftentimes I think that we look at these stories and we go, well, I'm Zacchaeus, or I'm that lost sheep, I'm that lost coin, I'm that lost son, and God pursued me. But friends, how often are we actually the crowd in these two stories? How often are we the ones who are muttering because God or Jesus is showing this love and this grace, this mercy and this acceptance for people we don't think are deserving of it? How often are we the crowd and we need to check ourselves? Because this is the kind of grace and mercy and love that Jesus shows all people. And he talks about this in connection to, you see Jesus loving the rich and the poor and the influential and the non-influential, the people who got their lives together, the people whose lives are just a mess. Like, Jesus engages everyone, because Jesus has come to seek and save the lost. Those who are in need, Jesus is there for. And it doesn't matter what their background is. It doesn't matter what's happening in their life. Jesus reaches out to them in love. That is his first connection. And so out of all of this, you have Jesus not caring about his reputation. He's caring about people. I mean, Jesus is called a drunkard. He's called other things in the text because people don't like how he's engaging with other people. And yet for Jesus, he goes, I don't care about my reputation. I care about people. And if people are going to slander me for being gracious and loving and kind to those who need the grace and love and mercy of God in their lives, then so be it. And so Jesus reaches out to Zacchaeus. And as a result of this conversation, Zacchaeus, again, it says that she stood up in verse 8. I think this is happening at the house. I think after this meal, I think people are on the outside, like literally have followed Jesus to the house going, what are you doing? And what are you going to do? Is this really going to happen? That there is somewhat of a public spectacle going on here. And after Zacchaeus says, I'm going to give half my possessions to the poor, I will pay back 4 times the amount, Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. Now, son of Abraham does in one way reference his Jewishness, because that's how people talked about that. But here's what I just want to offer up, is that Jesus both rescued and restored Zacchaeus. And here's what I mean, is that there's not only a rescue of things that were going on in his life that he just needed to be forgiven for, that he needed to be reconciled to God with, but that Jesus also then restores Zacchaeus to community. That Jesus, as a man that people would have respected, and they would have wrestled with this, right? Because they were upset with Jesus. But Jesus makes his big proclamation, this is a son of Abraham. that the salvation has come to this house, that Jesus is restoring him to community and restoring him back, because he would have been, again, dishonored because of his life, and now because of what he's going to do. Jesus makes his own public proclamation in order to not only rescue him, but to restore him back to the larger community. I just find that fascinating. All right, and here's the last one. And this one I just think is going to hopefully just your mind, because here we go. Jesus enabled Zacchaeus to become who he was called to be. We're given Zacchaeus' name in this story. Luke almost never gives us someone's proper name outside of Jesus and his disciples and the closest people to Jesus, particularly the women as well. We hardly ever get proper names, and yet we are given Zacchaeus. And names matter in the scriptures. Zacchaeus in Hebrew is the word Zakkai, and it means innocent, clean, and righteous. Now, before he interacts with Jesus, is he innocent? Is he clean? Is he righteous? No. And names were a sign of your identity and destiny, who you were supposed to be. As Zacchaeus, this is what he was called to be, and yet he wasn't. And he encounters Jesus. And check this out. Jesus' name in Hebrew is Yeshua, and it literally means the Lord's salvation. Again, verse 9, Jesus said to him, "Today's salvation has come to this house." There's a play on words going on here. That Jesus, whose name means salvation, comes to his house, and as a result of that, everything changes for Zacchaeus. Which I would just simply say this: when salvation comes to your house, salvation comes to your house. And as a result of this, Zacchaeus, who is not clean, who isn't innocent, who isn't righteous, now says, this is what I'm going to do. Give half my possessions to the poor. I'm going to make things right. And all of a sudden, his interaction with Jesus makes him clean. He now says, I'm going to be innocent of anything wrongdoing going forward. And I'm going to become righteous in how I engage and interact with people. And it's like, yes, oh my goodness, Jesus is helping him become who he was called to be. But friends, it gets even better, is that when we look at the biblical story, that when the Israelites exited Egypt, they went into the desert and they crossed through a body of water on dry ground. And during their time in the desert for those 40 years, God was shaping and molding them into the kinds of people they needed to be in order to live out their identity as a kingdom of priests, people who mediate on God's behalf, these children and these sons and daughters of Abraham. And yet, we have the story that then they leave the desert to come into the promised land where they're called to live this out, and they cross through a body of water on dry ground. It's called the Jordan River. And they come into the promised land, and friends, they blow it. And in the midst of all of this, we go, well, this is interesting, because right where the Israelites crossed, that was opposite of Jericho. They were on the plains of Moab, and it was here where they were reminded by Moses one last time that you are the child of Abraham, that you are called to live out God's covenant purposes in the land, and they blew it. And here Jesus is saying, now you are a child of Abraham. Not ethnicity, but I would say with identity and calling. And what's fascinating is that it's opposite Jericho, where John the Baptist is doing his baptism, his speaking and preaching for a baptism of repentance, calling people to get back on the path in order to be ready for the coming Messiah. It's where Jesus was baptized as well, and just opposite of that of Jericho, of where the Jordan River was, where it was where Israelites crossed in order to live out their identity and calling, and they blew it. It's like this very man is being restored as a child of Abraham to live out his calling and identity, not only as someone who is innocent, pure, and righteous, but someone who is called to take God's message into the world. And when Jesus enters our story, friends, we become who we've been designed to be. We become our fully human self who partners with the living God of the universe in order to have the kind of impact that we are looking for. That's what makes this story so absolutely amazing in connection to Jesus' involvement with Zacchaeus. Man, I feel like we should start preaching here. My, oh my, I'm in an empty room right now, but I'm just assuming we're all going to be together. So here you go. Here are the 5 actions of Jesus. And I don't know how these hit you today. I don't know how God has just kind of pricked your heart or just said, hey, think about this. But this, my friends, is what Jesus did. And there was just this amazing response. Everything changed in Zacchaeus' life. And I believe that that happens to us when we engage with Jesus. But I also believe that we need to model how Jesus loved and cared for other people as well. So there you go, Zacchaeus Part 3. Thanks so much for watching and for listening. Again, head over to walkingthetext.com in the comment section. Leave questions that you have. We're going to hopefully do a final episode where I'm just answering questions that you have. If there are questions there, we'll answer those in a final episode, and you can head over there as well to get additional discussion questions for personal and group study, and you can share this teaching and let everybody know what's going on with the Zacchaeus series if you're just finding it to be really great and helpful. So friends, thanks so much for tuning in, and may you walk out the text well in your life.